Hello, everyone. At this time, I'll be sharing with you the video interpretation of our upcoming adult Sunday school lesson for Sunday, February 18th. It also comes from the book of Daniel. It is called Faith in the Times of Trouble, and the emphasis will be in chapter 6. There are a number of specific verses that are in your quarterly, but like I usually say, expand. All of us live by values and beliefs. These values and beliefs keep us steady in times of difficulty and crisis. Today's lesson is about Daniel in the lion's den, a story very familiar to most of us. Yet, as it is often portrayed in Bible stories or in kids' videos, sometimes the context for this time in Daniel's life is misrepresented. In order for you to be complete in your study, you need to begin with chapter 5, verse 29, and read the entire 6th chapter. Chapter 5, verse 29 says, and I quote, "Then Belshazzar, who was the Babylonian king, gave an order, and they clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning Daniel that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom." Now, Daniel had spent at least 60 years in the royal palace of Babylon. He had been a provincial ruler. He had been a key advisor to several Babylonian kings, beginning with Nebuchadnezzar. When Daniel was a teenager, taken to Babylon, Babylon was the most powerful nation on earth. Prophecy from the Bible had stated that there would be 70 years of exile or captivity, and this prophecy would be fulfilled. The fact that Daniel had survived 60 plus years tells us that God's hand was upon Daniel. We see it in his interpretation of visions and in his great wisdom. Daniel was a superior leader, and he lived by values and beliefs that had been instilled in him even before he was taken as a prisoner to Babylon. Unlike so many people, Daniel would never compromise his beliefs. Moving on, chapter 5, verse 29 to 30, it says that Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, is killed, and Darius the Mede, king of the now expanding Persian Empire, is crowned at age 62. At this time, Daniel is, as we stated, an elderly man, at least 80 years of age, at least 80. One might think that his usefulness politically was over. Yet, when Darius became the new king, he kept Daniel on to help rule. Chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, quote, "Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom, stationed throughout the realm, and over them 3 administrators, including Daniel." Now, this is rather astounding. This November, we will have in our country a national election, and if there is a new president of a different political party, all of the cabinet members and advisors will change. They will be replaced, guaranteed. Therefore, the fact that Daniel was retained in a most high leadership position as a Jew of all things is quite amazing. It spoke to his effectiveness as a leader of many. Look at verse 3. Quote, "Daniel distinguished himself above the administrators and satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit, so that the king planned to set him over the whole realm." End quote. Now, this meant that among the 3 key administrators, Daniel was number 1. And since the other 2 administrators and their cronies knew that fact, they decided to devise a plan to have Daniel removed and killed. They did so based upon 2 facts. Number 1, Daniel's faith and worship of Yahweh God. And number 2, that any law of the Medes and Persians could not be revoked. The plan of the Daniel haters was much like that of Haman some years later, when Haman wanted to get all the Jews in Persia killed, exterminated. Now, Daniel knew what was going on. He knew about this plot against him, yet he continued to worship Yahweh God just as he always had. In his home, he went up to his upstairs room. He opened the windows facing Jerusalem, and 3 times a day, as he had been doing for years, he would be on his knees worshiping God. Everybody could see him. He was openly declaring his faith. What is significant is verse 14, which reads, and I quote, "As soon as the king heard this, he was very displeased. He set his mind on rescuing Daniel and made every effort until sundown to deliver him." King Darius was very fond of Daniel. So when it says he was displeased, he was not displeased at Daniel, he was displeased at himself and for letting himself be duped to the degree that he would not be able to save Daniel. Darius had personally signed the decree, and the only way to change the decree would be to get a different decree written that would override the first decree, but that was not going to happen. Darius was angry with himself as well as his Persian advisors. Therefore, Darius had no other recourse than to order that Daniel be placed in the den of lions. But look at verse 16, the last part, where Darius says to Daniel, "May your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you!" Exclamation mark. Rescue you. That night, King Darius did not sleep. Instead, he fasted. First thing next morning, Darius goes to the lion's den and he calls out for Daniel. And Daniel answers, fully alive and well. Verse 22, quote, "God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth." Lions, plural, at least 2 or more. "And they haven't harmed me." The overjoyed and relieved king then had Daniel brought out and instead placed Daniel's adversaries and their families in the den, where they were promptly torn apart and eaten by the hungry lions. The end of the story, much like that of Queen Esther, is that King Darius honors and protects Daniel and the Jews living in Persia. The king's new decree sounded much like one of the Psalms, and I will share that with you in what I call my paraphrase. God is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. End quote. And thus Daniel prospered during his remaining years in Persia. 2 points I'd like to make. The first is that faith in the midst of adversity and persecution, which is basically the title of the lesson. On page 87 of the Learner's Guide is a story from the life of Corrie ten Boom. Now, fortunately, I heard Corrie ten Boom speak live on 2 different occasions at my college campus. And your lesson writer gives too much credit to Corrie. The plan to harbor Jews in their home was a family effort led by Papa. It wasn't really Corrie's idea. They were all in it together. There were, of course, others who harbored and helped save the life of Jews. Remember the Diary of Anne Frank? Remember Schindler's List? But in the end, Corrie and older sister Betsy ended up together at the death camp called Ravensbrück. As Corrie told the story, Betsy was a woman of greater faith than her, greater love, greater compassion. Corrie admittedly had a hard time forgiving the Germans, and it was Betsy's voice in her head that allowed Corrie to forgive. Betsy's voice to forgive that helped Corrie's witness for Christ during and after the war. Daniel is a hero to every Christian who faces adversity and persecution just for being a believer. For us, being a Christian, Daniel is a hero not ashamed to be God's witness, as Paul wrote to the Romans in 1:16. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew and the Gentile. Second point is that God will not be defeated. The emphasis on God, not Daniel. The story of Daniel's faith is really the story of God's great power. Just as God delivered from the fiery furnace and the lion's den and from evil Haman's noose, God will not be defeated. Not then, not now. Even if we die for our faith, God will not be defeated. God bless. Have a wonderful week.